Karine Jean-Pierre is the White House press secretary. Welcome to Fast Politics, Karine.
Hello, Molly. Thank you so much for having me. Fast Politics. Wow.
We'll be fast.
We'll be fast, right?
We'll be fast. So you are press secretary. It's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty enormous job. Will you explain to our listeners who are very politically savvy but might not completely understand what is the job?
So the job is being essentially the top chief spokesperson for the President of the United States. That's the simplest way to explain it, which is I have the honor and the privilege to be at a podium for about an hour almost every day, 5 days a week at the most, to talk about the president's priorities, the president's agenda. How is he delivering for the American people? And then I take those questions from the members of the press on things that they want to ask about either that particular policy or the news of the day. And honestly, Molly, it is a privilege and an honor to be able to do that every single day for the most powerful leader in the world, the President of the United States. Sometimes I have to pinch myself because it is indeed something that I would have never have dreamed of. And I take that responsibility, Molly, so seriously. It is very heavy on my shoulders and heavy weight on my shoulder because I want to make sure that I'm doing it in an effective way so the American people know what we're dealing with, know what we're talking about, and also making sure that I'm capturing the president's voice and capturing also what it is that he wants me to talk about as it relates to the policies that we're trying to push forward.
Something I think people may not know is that the press is in sort of the same area as the rest of the White House staff. Can you explain that a little bit? Because that's sort of interesting.
Yeah, so I always say that we are the one department office on the campus, on the White House campus, where our constituents are with us. Our constituents are right here on campus. And what I mean about that is I just mentioned the White House briefing room. People know the White House briefing room. It is a well-known room or part of the White House that many people who come on tours, that is one of the places, it's like the Oval Office, the White House briefing room that they want to see for themselves. And because of that, there are some White House correspondents or White House reporters or White House producers that actually have offices and cubicles right kind of under, like to the back under on the floor of the briefing room, but also in the basement.
Right.
And it is certain publications have booths. It's been a lot of it is historical, how long they've been there. And so they actually work there. They have their work hours in their booths, in their offices, right there in the White House. And then some folks, I know you said your folks are pretty politically savvy, obviously, if they're listening to you and want to hear news about what's happening in DC and across the country. There is the White House North Lawn, which is right to the right of the White House, in front of the White House. And the White House lawn has all of the cameras and the TVs, and you'll see a lot of the White House correspondents, a lot of the White House reporters standing, doing their reporting, and you see the White House in the back behind them as the backdrop. And so those are those reporters as well. A lot of them spend most of their day right here at the White House doing their job, doing their work, coming to the briefing room and reporting.
Do you feel that your parents are okay that you're not a doctor now? Like, do you feel that they've given you the okay?
They have given me the okay. I have incredibly proud parents. My mom, I know, watches the briefing whenever it is on and is always proud and is always cheering me on, will let me know that she watched the briefing, brags about me, hears from her friends about me, and is just incredibly proud. I brought my mom to the state dinner, which is the first state dinner that the president had in his presidency. Obviously, COVID had slowed us down a bit for the first year and a half or so.
That was France, right?
Yes, President Macron and Bridget, his wife, they came in December 1st, and my mom was my plus one. And she was so thrilled and so happy. And she cried a couple of times. And the next day she told me, you just made me so happy. You just don't understand how happy you've made me. And she met the president for the first time, which I hadn't realized that she hadn't met him yet. And she went up to him and said, I love you so much. And he's just so good. President Biden's just so good at this. And he opened his arms and she put her head in his chest and he hugged her really, really tight and said, so lovely to meet you. And of course, said all the nice things about me, which he's very good at as well. And it's a moment that is one of the most beautiful moments that I have experienced with my mom. We have a photo of it that I'm going to get printed and framed so she could have in her home.
So I want to ask you, we had this administration, the last administration, the one before this, otherwise known as the former guy, and they really worked hard to demonize the mainstream media, to say that the media was the enemy of the people, and some of it worked. How do you interface with the media in a world where the media, one party really does hate the media?
And it's unfortunate. What we saw, let me just call that out very clearly, what we saw from the last administration and what they tried to do to the media, which is we are a democracy. Journalism is important and is something that we should fight for. And the president fights for here in this country and speaks to it globally, right, across the world. When we see a journalist that's being attacked or not allowed to report freely, not allowed to do their journalistic duties, we have to call that out because having a democracy is important. So that's one piece. I think we need to call that out. We have course corrected, if you will, and have hopefully brought back a healthier relationship. And we understand what it means for them to be in the room and to take those questions. Look, I think, Molly, regardless of who is in this role or which party is in power outside of the last administration, right, which was on what we saw, there's a natural tension, right, between the press and any administration, and the person in my job is the focal point of that, right?
Yeah.
And so what I want to be also clear is that tension, I think that tension is actually very good. It is a healthy part of our democracy. The press can and should question the government. That is their job. That's what they should do. They should seek the truth and hold the powerful accountable, right? That is what they should do. And I know some in the press, don't like my answers every day, but that is part of the give and take of the job. And that is not unique to me at all. I think that has been true for every press secretary. Specifically, I think as well, the modern day ones, since our briefings are televised, the briefing being televised kind of also changes that dynamic as well.
Yeah. Oh, no question. I also think that, the job here is for the media to be contentious in some ways.
Well, I think, like I said, a healthy back and forth, and there's always going to be tension. That makes sense. And they should question the government. They should question what it is that we're trying to do on behalf of the American people. And you know what? I appreciate that. That's my job. That is my job. I don't take anything personally because, like I said, every press secretary has had this experience. And so that's kind of how I leave it. I just do my job, do it the best of my abilities, making sure that two things that I really focus on is communicating the president's agenda to the American people. The American people truly, truly matter, right? Because that's who we're working on behalf of. And making sure that we do have that democracy, right? That back and forth, that journalism that is so important and how they report back and being transparent and talking about the work and what we're trying to do here.
It is interesting, though, that, like, for example, with the economy, this has actually been quite a much more positive economic cycle than many people thought. Inflation looks like it's moving in the right direction. There's a lot of good news in there. And there's been some hesitation on the part of the mainstream media, I feel like, to celebrate that good news.
Let me just echo a little bit of what you just said. The president's economic policy is working.
Yeah.
The president's economic policy is working. And the data shows that. You talked about inflation. We are seeing inflation cool for the last 6 months. We are seeing unemployment rate at a rate that we haven't seen in more than 50 years. We are seeing historical legislative successes that we haven't seen since LBJ. When you think about infrastructure, really pushing, we pushed a bipartisan infrastructure legislation that is now law, that is going to change communities across the country. Something that was a joke. Infrastructure Week was a joke in the last administration.
Right, remember.
Many presidents have tried to do this and were not able to do this, and we were able to do it. And let's not forget the American Rescue Plan, which was the first piece of legislation that really helped us get the economy back on its feet. Many people said we couldn't do it. We got it done with only Democrats. The bipartisan infrastructure legislation, many people said, there's no way you're going to be able to get that done in a bipartisan way. No one you're going to be able to do that. The president got it done. The Inflation Reduction Act, which is going to lower premiums, lower healthcare costs. It's going to really, truly help Americans with healthcare, with fighting climate change, right? With making sure that we're lowering costs even on energy and creating jobs. I didn't even say that, creating jobs. Guess what? People said there's no way you're going to do it. And the president got it done. The veterans piece of legislation that deals with an issue that veterans have had to deal with for a long time. That got done in a bipartisan way. The CHIPS and Science Act, that got done. And let's not forget, one of the last pieces this president signed in the last session was the Marriage Equality Act.
Right.
Which was done in a bipartisan way. And guess what? People said that wouldn't get done. The Gun Violence Prevention Act.
Yeah, I never thought that would get done.
Yeah, the Gun Violence Prevention Act. People didn't think that was going to be to do it. The most significant piece of legislation to happen in 30 years on gun violence. We still have a lot of work to do, but that got done. But to your point, we constantly have to push. We constantly have to lay out how it is that this president has transformationally changed how we deal with the economy. Instead of doing trickle down, which we don't believe in, he doesn't believe in, we're building economy from the bottom up, middle out, which is not leaving anyone behind. But you're right. It is very difficult. It is very difficult to get that out there. And so it is our job, right, to talk directly to the American people, to talk to your viewers, and as well, use other mediums to have those conversations so we can really broaden and grow our platform, our audience. So this is why it's so important for me to talk to you, Molly, as well as, talk to the folks in the briefing room, but also to have conversations with folks like yourself.
I interviewed the vice president, and it's impossible to quantify what it means to be first. But you, too, are first in a number of different ways as press secretary. Do you sort of take that in and say, like, people might give me a harder time? And people give me a very hard time, too. I'm not the first of anything, but I just try not to personalize it. Is that what you do, or do you have some other?
I stay focused on my job. I think historians and history will certainly write about that and have their opinion. My job is to focus on the work at hand. There's a lot of noise, Molly. As you know, there's a lot of noise every day, a lot of noise. My job, I believe, is to tune it out. I stay focused on what I can control, which is how I communicate from the podium about what the administration is doing every day to help the American public. And serving in these roles are not about me. It really isn't. It is not about me. It's not about the president even. It's about the public who we are here to serve. That's what it's about. And I stay really focused on that and tune out the rest. I'll add a few personal anecdotes because I think it's really important. We're in a bubble here in DC, and sometimes I don't really pay attention. You were talking about being a first and the communities that I represent. And sometimes I forget that. Yeah. And I inherently know it, right? Clearly, I know it. But sometimes I forget how much me being at that podium does touch people. I often encounter folks outside of this bubble, and not even too much outside of the bubble, right? Even in the suburbs of the DMV. I go out there and I have people who cry, who tell me how important it is to see me, and it is people from various backgrounds, right? Yeah. It could be someone young in the Black community or someone in a different community, or it doesn't matter, or the LGBTQ community. It is surprising to me how seeing me at the podium has touched so many people in a way that's inspiring, in a way that changes their lives. So if I'm able to do that at the same time, Molly, that is great. And I honor that. And like I said, I started off this interview saying it is a privilege and an honor to be doing this job. And if I can, on top of it, if I can inspire people, that's great. That is great. And that is, I think, important if you think about how the president thinks about things, right? If you think about how President Biden and Dr. Biden think about the importance of diversity, they think about how representation matters. They thought about what it meant to have someone like me at the podium. And it speaks to how diverse this administration is, and the most diverse in modern, presidents. I think that says actually more about them, more about the president than me.
Yeah, I absolutely think that's true. You have questions that you can't answer for any number of reasons. How do you deal with that?
I deal with it in the most honest way that I can, right? And it depends on the question, right? Most recently, it's because of a legal matter, right? If there's a legal matter, we have been very clear here. We have been very clear that we just don't comment on that. It doesn't matter what the topic is or who it's about. We have said, the president has said during the campaign, he has said the Department of Justice needs to be given back its independence. It is important to not politically interfere or get involved with any investigation. And this is the thing. You have heard us say this from the beginning of this administration. There is nothing absolutely new. And I said this at the beginning. There are going to be times where I understand. I totally get it. The press is not going to like my answer or think that I'm not giving them an answer. But here's the thing, Molly, I'm doing my job. Regardless, right? The answer I'm giving, I'm doing my job.
Yeah, so true. Thank you so much. This was so interesting.
I know. Thanks, Molly. I really appreciate the time. I really do.